Happy New Year. My name is Kim Bussey. I am the Key Relationship Manager here at Omnia, and we are so excited that you have joined us. I want to do a quick audio check. At the top of your screen, you will see an icon with a hand raised. If you can hear me, please go ahead and raise your hand. We want to make sure that everyone can hear me okay. Awesome. I'm seeing lots of hands going up. Thank you so much. While we are at this icon, I do want to go ahead and have John Loam. He is joining us from ACA Talent today to really talk to us about recruiting. John, go ahead and say hi to everybody so we can make sure they can hear you too.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I hope you can hear me okay.
Okay, perfect. If you could hear John, go ahead and do a quick raise of your hand one more time so we know we're good. Terrific. Thank you so much. While we are at this icon, you will be able to see where you can agree or disagree. Let us know if you need us to speak louder or speak softer. We all get passionate and excited about this topic, so if you need us to speed up or slow down a little bit, let us know. And because we can't hear you, laughter and applause is always appreciated. Also, a couple of quick housekeeping tools. We will have this presentation available for download at the end of our presentation, so you can go ahead and take notes if you want to. But if know that you can download the presentation, as well as we are recording it, and the recording will be available next week. If you don't follow Omnia on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, go ahead and follow us. You'll get that information when it's ready. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. The menu for applause, raise hand. Terry, up at the top, there's an icon with a person with a hand raised. So let's go ahead and get started. We're so excited about this webinar series, not only because it is kicking off our annual monthly Lunch and Learn series, but we're also in January doing something completely different. We are having a 4-week series that's really going to be honing in and focusing on that first part of the hiring process. Today we're going to be talking about recruiting, but next week we're talking about power interviewing. On the 22nd, we're going to talk about onboarding for success, and then to wrap up our January series, we're going to talk about delivering a painless 90-day employee performance evaluation. So for our presenters, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Kim Bussey. As I said, I'm the Key Relationship Manager here at Omnia. I like to say that my goal is to work with our clients on any special projects. Omnia assigns my paycheck, but I work for you. We're also tag teaming today, as with presenters, is with ACA Talent. Now, John Loam is the Division Manager of ACA Talent's Business Development and Professional Search Groups. Really what that is he joins us with over 13 years of experience with recruiting. And because that's what we're focusing on today, we wanted to have an expert. So John, can you tell us a little bit about who ACA Talent is?
Absolutely. So again, thank you for the introduction, and everyone, welcome one more time. ACA Talent's going on our 15th year in the recruitment business. Initially started as your typical executive search firm. In 2004, our president, Dave Sargent, joined, and one of the things we really came to uncover in the industry is there seemed to be a standard process missing from recruiting. So in 2004, we coined recruitment optimization to essentially be our primary focus. So it's not all about picking up the phone and calling candidates. It's all about creating a seamless process both on the recruiting front and on the candidate experience. So for the last 10 years, we've averaged about 4,500 hires annually for our customers in many verticals and industries throughout the entire country.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. So we're wonderful and very happy that you're here to join us today, John. And it's wonderful to partner with a company with such a long-standing history in the recruitment process. And we really wanted to partner with John and bring him on because we want to talk about how to hire smart. So for today, we're going to focus on the recruiting channels, but there are so many pieces that go into that initial hire. And before I go into any more, let me just say that we are going to do a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to type in any questions or comments as we go along. We will go ahead and answer them at the end, but type them in. You don't have to wait. Also, This is going to be a very interactive webinar. So keep in mind, we're going to be asking you some questions where you can respond via some polls moving forward. But before you can even start the recruiting channels, we want to talk about identifying needs. You have to understand what you're looking for, what position, and John's going to go into some really great details to help us understand that, as well as talking about the recruiting channels, as well as resume review, that initial interview, skills testing, assessments. That we're going to start to get into next week with that power interviewing webinar. So we're giving you a quick hint, but let's go ahead and get started because we're going to promise you we will end right at 1:30. And John, can you tell us really what the true cost of vacancy is?
Yeah, so essentially, when it comes to the cost of vacancy, it's not so much about the fact that a position happens to be open and therefore it's costing you money. I think that's sort of a common sense approach, but the reality is cost of vacancy expands far beyond that. Let's say if you're in a production environment and you have internal employees that have been there for 3 to 5 years, they've mastered your process, they know your products, they know your tools, they know your machines. Every time one of those individuals leaves, if you don't have another person internally to step up into the role, hiring externally means that you have the learning curve, the training process. So the cost of vacancy is not just an immediate cost. It can go on for months on end. More importantly, for a sales position, naturally you have revenue loss, you have market share loss to competitors, and you have relationships that go with an employee leaving. So the cost of vacancy can often, and many of you may or may not have heard this before, cost of vacancy can be upwards of 10 times an employee's salary. So there's a lot to consider when either you're replacing an individual or adding to staff.
Well, I apologize. We had a little bit of some sound difficulties. Before we go to the next side of the true cost of vacancy, we're going to go to a quick poll. So before I click on this, it's going to be something that's going to be a little bit different. I want you to go ahead and start thinking about the first word that you think of when I say recruitment. So go ahead and just go ahead and think about what that word is. And now that we have this, type in what it is. Maybe when you hear the word recruitment, you think expensive or difficult, and you want to make sure headhunting. Thanks, John. What else do you think about? Maybe it's recruiting that you do. Maybe it's recruiting that someone else does. So I'm seeing some people typing down in comments. If you'll pop up, great. Thank you. So Tracy, quality, opportunity, difficult. Resumes, finding talent. So as you see, as we're hearing a word that continues to pop up, difficult. It keeps growing and growing and growing. Stephen, I love that. It's a pain. Applicants. Overall, though, some of the things that we're seeing is just continual. Great, great word, Linda, because recruiting is definitely continual. Advertise time. John, how do we bring all of the, okay, so John, overall, we see difficult and time consuming is the two words that pop in to the majority of our attendees' thoughts. So what do we do for them to prevent them from being lost in that recruitment maze?
So great intro, because time and difficulty are really are sort of just the cusp of the challenges in recruiting. It can be extremely time consuming, and from an external recruitment perspective, recruitment can be very financially rewarding, but the typical phrase that we use in the industry is, if it were easy, everybody would do it. So there's no hidden mask that recruitment is a great challenge, from the process to finding the talent. So if we start with the basics, and that's really what this is about, are the 101 basics to ensure you have a recruitment platform in place to see effective hiring. To begin, you want to ensure that you identify the needs before you start looking for talent. is in regards to what it is you're actually hiring, what you're hiring, why you're hiring, and more importantly, when you want the new people to be in place. If you approach recruitment with an overly broad recruitment focus, and this often happens with small and medium sized companies, whether you go through a job posting or some social media blast, you may either have no response or you may have thousands of applicants. An overly broad focus can essentially waste a great deal of time because the last thing you want to do is interview 20 to 30 people before you realize what it is you actually want to hire. So you want to approach your recruitment methods with a more targeted approach. If you know you're looking for candidates with A, B, and C, then specifically cater your recruitment to find candidates with A, B, and C. Once you ensure that you are going after a specific talent pool, and you're going to approach that pool with a very specific recruitment focus. You want to ensure that the actual process to hire people and the interview process does not have too many steps and is not too convoluted or frustrating for the people going through that process. Once you have a process in play, and believe it or not, as I mentioned earlier, our firm is entirely about process. It's significantly more important than many small to medium-sized businesses understand. Being able to attract talent is a direct reflection on your process. If you're hiring for entry to mid-level talent, and really any vertical or industry, whether it's sales, operations, human resources, these days rather, the employment marketplace is exploding throughout the country. I wouldn't say the recession's necessarily over, but from an employment perspective, we believe that it basically is. What that means is for every one person available for a job, there are between 5 to 10 opportunities for that person at a very bare minimum. So in order to attract the right talent, you have to make sure you're competitive in the marketplace, that you're painting a positive picture during the interview process, but most importantly, you're not losing candidates because they're going through an unnecessarily long or unnecessarily challenging interview process. If they are entry level to mid-level talent, the chances are they are going to be on a paycheck to paycheck basis. They're feeding their family with each paycheck. If your interview process takes 8 weeks and another company is offering a very similar opportunity and can hire them in 2 days, guess where they're going to go? Because they have no choice. Part of your branding mismatch is a part of your employment branding, and to ensure you don't have a mismatch is to ensure that your website, your business, your strategies in doing business also reflect how you're hiring people. So if individuals are hearing from the job description on up about an opportunity with your company, about the details of working for your company and what it's like to work for your company, once they go work for your company, you want to make sure that's what they actually experience, because, and we'll talk about this later, that can affect just much more than your recruiting. It can affect bottom line revenues as well. Inefficiently using resources can make the recruitment process not just challenging but sometimes impossible. And this is often when we hear companies have a job open for 3, 4, or 5 months. A lot of times what we find out is either the tools, the process, or the actual people they're using in the first place may not be the right people. If the hiring manager is not part of the process from the very beginning, there's usually a very big discrepancy as to what you're looking to hire and what you actually end up hiring. And again, that's a topic we'll talk about in just a moment. Technology, and in a digital age with technology and automation tools and automation processes, technology has risen to be one of the foremost tools we rely on, whether it's applicant tracking systems, postings, job boards, social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. If technology is not currently part of your recruitment platform, staying competitive in the marketplace is virtually impossible. Now, that being said, I do want to throw out there, in 2015, the single most innovative tool in recruiting is the telephone, and that still hasn't changed. If you're recruiting internally and you're posting and waiting for people to apply, chances are you will end up doing exactly that, waiting. Once all this is put together, you have to have measures of success. If you don't know how your recruitment or how you're recruiting, or more importantly, how your recruitment platform is currently working for you, improving that recruitment program is going to be impossible. You can't fix what is either not broken or is broken and you don't know where or why. So it's truly a maze, and that's really why we call it that way, because you can get lost in so many different parts of the recruitment process and essentially hurt your hiring, not just now, but in the long term as well.
Absolutely, John. And I love these points because it ties right into the top 3 hiring mistakes that at Omnia we hear quite a bit about. where first they compromise. So we tell everyone, don't compromise. It is, you have to know what you're looking for. And then tying right into unable to hook the candidates, do you find that a lot of times that companies are trying to sell the job and not the company versus branding themselves?
A lot of times, yeah, and it's unfortunate because, as I go back to what I mentioned earlier, even if you're talking to individuals who are not actively looking, let's say you headhunt an individual, and because of your opportunity, they're now interested. What often happens 9 times out of 10 is a person starts interviewing and they say, I haven't been looking for a job, but if I'm going to interview with this company, I might as well see what else is out there. Well, many companies are doing exactly what you may be doing, which is selling the job. Hey, you can make great money. There's unlimited earning potential. You can grow. That's great information, but they just heard exactly that same thing from 5 other employers. So you do want to talk about your company. Why should they work for you? And you always want to play that devil's advocate. It's not being rude. What do you mean? Why do you want to work for me? It's a fair question. If a person's truly talented enough and capable of getting your position, then you obviously realize they are capable of getting a similar role elsewhere. Why do they want to come work for your company? Is it your culture, your organization? Is it room to grow? What else is it about that they want to come work for you? So you really should be selling both company and opportunity, but the company is so important.
Absolutely. And the point that I really want everyone to hear is the reason why we set up these 4 series of webinars for January to kick off the new year is that the hiring mistakes begin a lot of times before you even start the recruitment process. You've already compromised, you're selling the job, you're selling the company, and it's very unstructured interview process. And Dennis, you had a great comment that you made a little bit earlier is that people know the tricks at an interview. If you Google how to interview, you're going to get over 1 million hits in less than a minute. So I love the fact that, John, you hit these points from the very, very beginning, and that really take away you, from this for the attendees is that you're hearing you've got to start before you even make that first ad or that first phone call. So before we go on to the next step, we talked a little bit about the recruitment maze. Let's go ahead and talk about job descriptions for a minute. So if the process for hiring starts before you even start, go ahead and click yes or no. How many of you have a written job descriptions in place? And then the second question I want to explore is when do you update those job descriptions? Maybe it's whenever you hire, you review all of them annually. Rarely, or let's face it, I don't have any job descriptions in place. It's all in my head, and so I never update them. Go ahead and select something, and we'll see where everybody kind of stands on this. Okay, so we're seeing overall about 94% of you have written job descriptions in place. That's wonderful. And Olive, it makes me cringe to know some companies don't have job descriptions either, but you would be very surprised about how many don't have those job descriptions. And it ties into how can you find someone who's going to be the best match for it when there's no job description. But let's look at the second one really quick. When do you update those job descriptions? So that's very, split. We've got about a third of you that review it every time you hire, which is excellent. The job changes as your strategic plan for your business changes. If you haven't hired for that position in over 5 years, you definitely want to take a look at that job description. And about a third of you look at it annually. And then we're seeing a little bit of you that rarely look at them. John, why is it so important as a recruitment step to look at your job description?
So job descriptions essentially are the initial phase of putting a recruitment plan together, right? But in order to do so, it does go back to what I previously mentioned, which is identifying what you're looking for in the first place. I actually found the results to be surprising. I was expecting a lot of people to say they haven't. And to Olive's point, While it may be shocking, it's amazing how many companies are actively hiring and don't have job descriptions. And I shared with Kim yesterday morning around 10 a.m., we onboarded 2 new customers here at ACA Talent. Both of these customers are medium-sized companies, over 200 employees and $20 million in revenue, and they're putting together new sales teams with no job descriptions. Now, I didn't tell them I was disappointed in that, but the truth is, you already have a pre-existing team of 25 salespeople. How did you hire them with no job description? People should know what they're going to be getting into before they sign an offer letter and start with your company. So putting together in-depth job descriptions is extremely important, not just to outline the actual details of the position, but to help attract people to the job as well. So I look at job descriptions, believe it or not, the same way I look at resumes. My assumption is most people listening to this call, like myself, have looked at the generic resumes where as you're going through the resume, you have a bullet point that might say collaborating with different departments internally. The next bullet point might say putting together weekly reports. Well, that's great, but when I'm looking at that resume, the truth is I don't know what it means to collaborate with internal departments, who, when, why, where. When you're doing reports, what tools are you using? How often are you doing the reports? What are you reporting on? And who are you reporting to? Well, the resume is the same. The job description is the same way. If you're going to have an individual, let's say they are a bookkeeper, and they're going to be responsible for accounts payable, they're going to be responsible for turning in monthly crystal reports, if they're going to be responsible for turning in quarterly profit and loss statements, why would you not have that information on the job description? The job description shouldn't simply say general bookkeeper duties and accounting. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have 1,500 bookkeepers and accountants from all over the place applying to a job, when the truth is none of them have any idea what they're actually applying to. More importantly, when you're actively recruiting, especially if you're going after currently employed talent, very often we'll pick up the phone and a candidate says, look, I'm very interested in hearing more about the opportunity, but I'm currently working as we speak. Can you send me the job description and I'll call you this evening? Well, what do you say to that when you don't have one ready to send? Doesn't look very good, doesn't look like you're prepared, or more importantly, like you're professional. Part of the job description, whether it's to go along with your social media or your job posting, is an opportunity to promote the company and opportunity. So instead of just putting together a job description where it simply outlines 5 or 6 bullet points of the job, it is another opportunity to put a paragraph in about your company, about why I should come work for your company. So if you're looking for a bookkeeper, what would it be like to be a bookkeeper for your company? Well, I want to have that idea after reading through a job description. If I look at your job description and I don't understand why I should go work for you or what the job is in the first place, I'm probably not going to be applying, and it's amazing how often that actually happens. Once you have the job description put together and you decide which recruitment channel you're going to be using, whether it's an internal recruiter or you're going to be utilizing an external resource like my firm, you need to make sure that the hiring manager is part of the process. And once again, it's amazing how often this doesn't happen until later in the process. If you have an internal recruiter who's hiring, but that internal recruiter is either a recruiter or an HR generalist, the chances are they're not a specialist in your industry. They're not an operations wizard or a sales wizard. They're not an engineer. They're an HR person. They're a recruiter. There's nothing wrong with that. But your hiring manager is likely the individual who's making the decision, who's responsible for training the person, and who's ultimately responsible for that person's success. Therefore, from the very beginning, the hiring manager should be part of the process. And what happens is a lot of times the HR person or the external recruiter brings talent to the manager, and interview after interview after interview, we're not making hires. Well, the hiring manager sits down and says, I just don't understand. I told you I want X, Y, and Z, but you're not getting it for me. But the problem is, what if the HR person doesn't understand X, Y, and Z in the first place? Hiring managers should be part of writing the job description, especially if that hiring manager has done the job themselves. If you're putting together job descriptions and one of your employees has done that job, get them involved in the process. Because the truth is, if you've never done the job yourself, do you truly know all of the ins and outs of what it takes to be successful in that role? So make sure your hiring manager is part of the initial process, is part of the interview. Don't have them go through 3 rounds of pre-screens and different types of profiles or tests or online analyses for them to then speak to a hiring manager and say, you know what, I'm not interested in this person. Have them be part of it from the very beginning. Have that hiring manager be a part of localized recruitment strategies as well. If you're hiring entry to mid-level employees, especially if you're looking to hire recent college grads, you should know about every local college and university or even technical school in the area. And more importantly, your human resources department should be communicating with those colleges' career services departments. Recent college grads usually go to their student advisor and they help them try and find local opportunities. Well, if they don't know about your local opportunity, the question should be, why is that? So you need to make a conscious effort of not just knowing the local paths to find talent, but even more importantly, you should understand the local employment marketplace. Who else in your area is hiring? What are they hiring? How are they hiring? What are they offering? If you're about to put a job posting on one of the big job boards and there's 10 other employers looking for exactly what you're looking for and they have the same job posting, there's no reason someone should be clicking on your ad. Now there are tools we have internally to help find this information, but it's something you can do on your own as well by simply going online and typing in jobs in your marketplace. You want to know if you're being competitive in the marketplace. Otherwise, how are you going to know if you can attract the best talent or not? Next
Great.
piece is a behavioral interview. And Kim, I think you may have had something to step in there.
I did. I had posed the question. We have a lot of our um, attendees are currently hiring right now. And I just thought that we've got a lot of great information. And before we really go into that timely feedback, and is to ask for them just to pop in, if you're currently hiring, what is the biggest pain that you're experiencing during that hiring process? Is it finding the best candidates? Is it getting hiring manager input? Just thought we would do a quick checkpoint right now to see what some of the pains are. And I see people are typing, and John, you had some great information about getting the hiring managers are as they are typing in, and I'm starting to see a theme of lack of quality candidates. What is your thoughts about not only talking to the hiring manager, but to talk about top performers in that position? Do you think that's a good idea to get their input as well, or just focus on the managers?
It depends on the role, but absolutely. What will happen a lot from an external recruitment perspective is we'll talk to an HR individual, usually an HR director, HR manager, and we'll get the job description from them. We'll talk about the profile of the person we're looking for, and we always ask for an opportunity to be introduced directly to the hiring manager. If there is an opportunity to talk to good internal employees, top producers, we'd like to do so as well because it helps us understand, why are you a top producer? What is it that you're doing differently than the rest of your team to be number one? Because once I know that, I'm going to go find someone exactly like you. But the problem might happen is if we're not allowed to speak to the hiring manager, and this unfortunately happens more often than not, 2-3 weeks into the hiring process, we're going candidate after candidate and nobody can figure out what's going on. 3 weeks in, the hiring manager finally decides to call and says, I just don't understand it, guys. All I'm looking for is X, Y, and Z. It's unfortunate because we've spent the last 3 weeks looking for A, B, and C based on what your HR person told us. And again, that's why not just your hiring manager, but if you have other people who are top contributors and have done that job, should absolutely be a part of the process.
Great. And as you were talking, great points, but then the theme of the day is finding the right candidate for the position. So I love how all of this navigating recruitment and some best practices to put in place helps us regardless of the size of the company. So it's terrific. So thank you for letting us take that just check-in point and take it away. Tell us what else we can do as a best practice.
Sure. I noticed Donita posted a message here that getting people to actually read the minimum qualifications before they submit an application or resume. It's actually, this is one of the most common practices we see, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's almost humorous when you post a job for X and the complete polar opposite applicants start applying. This may be a major aha moment for many people in a small to medium-sized business company, but both Career Builder and Monster, they have automated tools for candidates. And when you're a candidate and you're setting up your candidate profile, there are actually options that allow your resume and application to be auto sent based on keyword searches. So if you're a candidate looking for a sales job in this industry, in this market with this compensation, and you click auto apply, anytime a new posting goes up where the keywords are matched, their resume is automatically sent to that job, and they don't even know that their resume was sent until they get their monthly update. So what happens? You get 1,000 resumes from people who aren't qualified for the job. never read the job posting, and may not even know they applied. And many people don't know about those tools. So it is a very challenging area to get to come across, and which it's also why sometimes a job posting is not the right way to go, so that doesn't happen. To get back on track here, once you cover through some of the initial things we spoke about, when it comes to the interview, and Kim, I believe you're going to be discussing interviews more in one of your future webinars, but just to lightly recap on it, in the day of social media, you can go to Glassdoor.com, Indeed.com, Facebook, MySpace, LinkedIn, and before you ever interview with a company, you can find out what it's like to interview at the company. More importantly, you may even be able to find out what some of their interview questions are. On Glassdoor.com, when you go to a company review, there's actually an interview section about that exact thing. You want to ensure that your interview is a behavioral-based interview, that it's an interview pertaining to the actual job itself. If you're looking to hire an operations manager, then have your questions be relevant to their experience, what they've done in the past, and how that experience will relate to their job. If you have certain processes in place, in the interview, discuss those processes and ask the candidate how they will be a part of those processes and what their thoughts are. If you're asking them questions like whether or not they'd rather ride in a blimp or a jumbo airplane, which, funny or not, are questions that are sometimes actually asked, and your goal is to see how they respond to a spontaneous question, you're wasting their time, you're wasting your time, and more importantly, 2 to 3 days later, that question goes up on the internet, people read it, don't want to interview you. You have to be professional in the interview. A candidate should be interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them. Feedback is incredibly important in the recruitment process. In a situation where a hiring manager has his HR counterpart doing the hiring for him, if they are not communicating as to why the candidates applying or interviewing are not being hired, then how is the recruitment process supposed to improve? If you're using an internal partner like myself, and I send you a candidate, and you don't like that candidate, it's not personal, it's business, but if your feedback is simply, John, I met this candidate today, not the right fit. I understand, but what do you want me to do about that? I now am walking away with no better understanding of why they're not the right fit. So John, they were great, but they just don't have enough experience in doing X, Y, and Z. I was asking him questions, and he simply wasn't able to answer them. I need someone who's more proactive, more objective. Whatever the feedback may be, don't feel like you're going to hurt someone's feelings. They need that feedback in order to better hone the search. Feedback within 24 to 48 hours is generally what's considered appropriate. Don't wait a week to tell either the candidate or your HR counterpart why that person was not the right fit. Technology can help you support this process. If you're interviewing candidates and you feel very strongly for them, but perhaps you're new at hiring, or more importantly, maybe you truly aren't 100% sure what you want to hire or if they're the right fit, it's a great time to begin implementing tools like an Omnia assessment to help unlock certain skill sets or character traits that you may either need to train more on, perhaps you didn't pick up in an interview, but it can help hire the right people the first time, as opposed to going back to the cost of vacancy, hiring the wrong people and having it cost you money, time, and resources. You have to be able to measure your results. If you don't currently know what your turnover in the first 90 days looks like, if you don't currently know what your hiring ratios are from how many people you interview to how many people you hire, if you don't know how many people do you offer the position to and how many accept or don't accept, these are measurable benchmarks where in order to improve, you have to identify these things in the first place. So you want to get something up front before you begin anything else as to how you're going to track this successful recruitment program. Once you've done all these things, it's about driving continuous process improvement. Recruiting is never finished. Even if you're a company who says, I have no openings or I'm not hiring, you should still be interviewing. What if that diamond in the rough is out there that can change the face of your organization and you never met them because you're quote unquote not hiring? Once you have your process in place, every 30, 60, 90 days, review that process. How is it working? Are you getting the results you need? Are you getting them in a timely manner? Is it working? And if so, it doesn't mean it's perfect. Keep improving.
John, we have going to take a quick poll real quick, because on your slide you talked about using technology, but I'm curious, for those of you that are attending, what type of technology do you use to recruit new hires? Are you using social media like Facebook and Twitter? Are you using your own company website? Maybe it's online job postings like Monster and Career Builder. Or are you using resume databases? Go ahead and let us see where you're looking. And it looks about 66%. How do I pick all? I should have added that, Tracy. Unfortunately, we don't have that. So maybe you use all of those options because you're trying to look for everything. But overwhelmingly, John, it looks like people are using those online job postings versus their own company website or social media. So let's get back to tell us what else we need to know about recruitment for us.
Sure. So, first and foremost, when it comes to job postings, I would never tell anybody that that's the wrong thing to do. Oftentimes, that is the first step, not just posting externally on job boards or social media, but if your organization's large enough where you may have internal talent, post a job internally as well. We do that here all the time before we open up a job to outsiders who inside may be the right fit. Job postings are notoriously not nearly as effective as they once were. Uh, Employment advertising on the internet is relatively new in the last 10 to 15 years, at least to the level it is now. And as many of you probably realize, employment advertising in newspapers is virtually non-existent. Is still some of it out there. I don't know any of it that's still effective. And in fact, that is my background. I come from employment advertising prior to recruitment, and the job was all about optimizing job postings. Where do you post a job? How do you post a job? Job postings are sometimes the most cost effective if they work right and if they work quickly. Unfortunately, job postings remove the most control from the recruitment process of any recruitment method out there, because you don't know who's going to look at your ad, you don't know who's going to respond to your ad, and there's a 99.9% chance that the A player, the best talent for the job, because they're not looking for a job, will never see your job posting. Now, I'm not telling you not to do a job posting, but you do need to consider that when doing it. Don't expect that you push the button to post the ad and then the magic happens. It usually doesn't turn out that way. So it does go beyond post and hope. And I think a lot of companies still do that. I'm putting up a job posting, but nobody's calling me. I wish I could tell you I'm surprised, but unfortunately that is 2015. Job postings are not what they once were. One of the reasons I no longer do it. When you are doing a job posting, you want to make sure you're tailoring the message to the audience, and this can tie directly into the job description. A job description, in a certain sense, should be a more elaborate version of your job posting. If you're looking to hire an electrician and your job posting simply states, "Now hiring electrician, $15 an hour, 40 hours a week," that's great, and people who are out of work and sometimes for the wrong reasons may very well apply to the job because they need a job. But if an actively or gainfully employed electrician who may already be making $15 an hour, who may already be getting 40 hours a week, has no reason to call you. That's what they have. But they doesn't mean they're not interested in your opportunity, and it doesn't mean they're not currently unhappy. Use that job posting as the first stepping stone and why they should call you. And again, you could put in things like great environment, been in business for 50 years, number one service provider in the area. You know your business better than anybody else. Talk about your business. The positive interview and employee experience. Employees applying to your company, whether you're interviewing them or not, should have a positive experience. Most of us have probably heard, or at least I'd like to assume, there are articles on a weekly basis on LinkedIn and on other social media platforms about the vast majority of candidates who apply to positions and they never hear anything in return. Sometimes, especially if you're a medium to large organization or if you're light on human resources internally, it can be impossible to respond if there's 1,000 applicants, and I get that. But that's when technology can come in place to either build in automated tools to ensure every applicant gets a response. But people who aren't getting responses, or people who are interviewing with your company and not getting feedback, these days that information will be found online. That doesn't just hurt your employment brand because people aren't going to want to bother interviewing with your company. It may affect your business externally when companies are researching you that you're about to do business with. If people don't like going to work for you and don't like the process, why would you want to do business with them? Culture is everything. In this day and age, it's one of the foremost piece in hiring. Soft skill sets have become one of the number one things you need to look for when you're hiring an individual. It's not just about having a strong resume. It's not just about, has this person ever done this job before? It's all about, can the person do the job for your company and your manager? So talk about your culture, whether it's your dress code, your laid back environment, your cubicle or office structure, the work hours, whatever it is, build culture into your employment brand. If you don't currently know what your culture is, you're not going to be able to sell it to anybody. Why would they want to come work for your company? Always remember that former candidates or applicants, they may be future customers of yours or future applicants of yours. Someone who interviews with your company today, you may love their personality, you may love what they say in an interview, but maybe they're just not ready or not qualified for the position. 4 years from now, they might be. If they had an appalling experience meeting you in the first place, not only are they never applying again, but the 15 people they know who are also good for the job, they're also not going to refer to apply to your company. It's extremely important to have a very positive and warming experience throughout your recruitment and your branding and your interview process.
John, these are some great points, and we're going to dive deeper into that as well about culture and some of these tips that you're talking about next week at the Power of Interviewing. So we are tracking right on point. So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked a little bit about measurements of success, how to know if things are working. There is much more to this piece, and as I mentioned much earlier in the chat, we are all about process, metrics, recruitment metrics. Many companies have sales teams, and those sales teams have key performance indicators. What do they need to do to be successful? Well, why shouldn't your recruitment? So let's talk about some of the basics and recommendations we would mention for you to start tracking whether or not what you're doing is working or if you need to make improvements. The first and foremost is essentially the time to fill. How long from a job being opened to a job being filled is it currently taking you? If your total cycle time is 8 or 9 weeks, and by improving your process or your recruitment channel or a variety of the tools we've discussed, if it can cut that 8 or 9 week time cycle down to 4 weeks, what does that mean for the bottom line of your organization? If you're running a production plant and you've got 3 workers doing overtime because you're understaffed, you're paying overtime fees, you're burning out your employees, and you're probably about to lose 1 or 2 of them to now have 2 or 3 openings. If it's a sales position and you don't have somebody out there in the market, the time to fill is not just lost revenue. It's lost training, it's lost knowledge, it's lost relationships, and by the time you find that right person for the job, the accounts they're supposed to be selling to may be working with other people who closed the deal first. So how long is it taking you to fill and why? Conversion rates. We talked about this before. If you're interviewing 20 people to hire 1, something is very wrong. Either you don't truly understand what it is you're looking for in a person, or you're not communicating to whoever's doing your recruiting, or they're not listening to you. If you can't fill a job with 3 to 4 interviews, something is wrong. Now, of course, that may change the more strategic and the more specific the job gets, but for the entry to mid-level section, it shouldn't be rocket science, and unfortunately, sometimes it is made out to be that way. Post-hire performance. I'm going to talk about turnover and post-hire performance together. If you don't know what your current retention or attrition rates are, how many people leave in the first 90 days, the 6 months, and the first year of employment, that can be very challenging to ever improve your retention or your onboarding process. Why are people leaving and when are they leaving? That is part of post-hire performance. For a salesperson, that may simply be easy as monitoring revenue generation. Are they selling or are they not? But it's not always that black and white. And that's an area where we see many small companies making mistakes is 3 to 4 weeks after they hire a salesperson, they're not selling, they fire them. Something's wrong there. Something's wrong there. Something is missing, whether it's the training or it's the onboarding. So in order to have a post-hire performance, you need to have KPIs, key performance indicators in place. This is not just sales. This is for any type of job, human resources, operations, administration. If you don't know what a new hire is supposed to accomplish by their 30-day mark, by their 60-day mark, and by their 90-day mark, how are they going to know what to accomplish once they come work for you? And how are you going to gauge whether or not they were the right hire in the first place? This does come down to cost per hire. There are hard and soft costs. The hard costs are usually quite obvious. Employee leaves or you fire an employee and you can usually calculate how much you paid them while they were there and so on and so forth. But what all of the hidden costs, the costs that you're not currently monitoring, which is the time it's going to find the time it's going to take to find a new person, the time it's going to take to train the new person, and the chance you're taking in hiring a new person in the first place. As you are beginning to grow, if you're a small to medium-sized company, today you may very well be a medium to large company tomorrow. Technology in your recruitment platform does become much more essential for compliance purposes and legalities. Many different arenas of hiring, or even some states, do have laws and regulations around you must speak to every person who applies to your job, or if you're being monitored as to how many of a specific race you hire, you can't report on this information without tracking it in the first place. So it does go back to the metrics. For a small company, you may want to do this on Excel or even a Word document. If you only have 10 or 11 employees and you hire one person a year, this part is not going to be that challenging for you. But if you're a medium or larger company, you have 100, 200 companies, you're hiring 10, 15, 20, 50 people a year, you need to have a very clear understanding of every piece of the process. How many people are applying? Where are they coming from? What methods did you use to find those candidates? Out of the people applying, how many are you speaking to? How many are you interviewing? All of this information needs to be tracked. The most recommended tools are called ATSs, or applicant tracking systems. There are some I could recommend. Now is probably not the right time for that, but they can make or break your recruitment process if you're in heavy growth mode. So determine meaningful measures of success. If you don't know where you currently are, and if you don't know where you want to go, how are you going to ever get there?
John, those are some great information, and thank you so much for everything that you've given us. I want to go ahead. We've got about 15 minutes left. Open it up for question and answers. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box right now. We will go ahead and talk about them. Also want to encourage you to sign up for the Power Interviewing for next week. We're really going to talk a little bit more as well on some of those points that John talked about that understanding what you're looking for, how to bring in the hiring manager. On the 22nd, we're going to be talking about onboarding for success, which is also going to talk about, once again, tying into those attrition rates that John was talking about. And on the 29th, we're going to talk about delivering a painless 90-day job evaluation. And I see some people are typing. So while they are typing, I want to ask John, while we're getting some questions, we are a strategic partner with ACA Talent, and one of the packages that we offer in our partnership is a resume package. Can you talk about that for just a moment?
Absolutely. So about 6, 7 years ago, we started building a tool. In fact, I joined ACA Talent about 8 years ago, and I brought 3 of my counterparts with me. And as I mentioned earlier, we all come from employment advertising. I became very, very tired of all of the customers, and I worked for the largest weekly newspaper in the country, not a little, cornerstone newspaper company. And I got tired of all the employers hearing, John, I'm just not getting phone calls. We're posting ads. We're getting the wrong people. And don't get me wrong, postings sometimes work very well. In fact, the most recent person we hired here at ACA Talent was someone who responded to a posting. So they do work, but have caution. We determined to come up with what's called the strategic resume search tool. Many times when we talk about this tool, we'll hear an employer or a client say, yeah, but John, I already have access to CareerBuilder. Having access to one of the job boards and knowing how to use them are very different things. And there is a very large disparity between having these tools and knowing how to truly optimize and manipulate the responses you're getting. We have about 10 access to about 10 of the major job boards, as well as a database of 750,000 active candidates in the U.S. The way the strategic resume tool works is I sit down with a customer and I ask for them to be as specific as possible as to what they're looking for. So if you want to hire an accountant, how many years of experience, what type of degree? Are you looking for CPA or standard accounts payable or accounts receivable? What kind of environment do you want them to come from? Do you want them to have aeronautics experience or oil experience? Be as specific as possible. What we do is we utilize the tool and we incorporate all of these parameters. And once we put together the agreement, we need about 48 hours. And what will happen is you will receive 20 resumes. And these resumes will be of candidates which are, if not exact matches, close to it, that qualify for your position, and more importantly, are actively looking for work. So as opposed to spending $500 on a newspaper ad, which more often than not is about what they cost at the minimum, especially if you're going with a large daily, Instead of spending $500 on a newspaper ad, you can spend $500 on this tool and within 2 days have 20 resumes of actively seeking job applicants that match your criteria. Now, we are very honest. When we offer this tool, we do share with employers there is no guarantee it will work. We guarantee we'll find you the 20 resumes, that they'll be qualified and that they will be active, but we can't guarantee that they'll want to work for your company or that they will be happy with your compensation plan or that they want to be in your industry. It's the only tool we provide where we don't actively speak with candidates, so you still do have some control removed from the situation, but much more so than a job posting.
Okay. Terrific, and thank you for that. We have a couple of questions that, and I also want to let you know what the takeaways. You can highlight on it and download the file. That should work. If not, then Carrie is working on that information. But one of the first questions that we're seeing in the chat boxes is that Julie has worked with radio stations with advertising, and it's been very effective to find passive applicants. Can you talk to us a little bit about exactly, are those the individuals who are interested in a job but not actively applying, and how are those people a little bit more difficult in recruiting?
Sure. So the active candidates are exactly that. Those who have made it apparent they're looking for a job. They're applying to positions. They have their resume posted. But the reality is the best candidates on the market, where are they currently? They're working. And they're probably not looking for a job. And in fact, they may have not even put a resume together in the last 5 years because they're not looking. So to answer Terry's question, are passive applicants those individuals who might be interested in a job not actively applying? Absolutely. Over 85% of the candidates that we place with our employees are not through the active channels. While we utilize all of them, from CareerBuilder, Monster, Indeed, SalesJobs.com, you name it, we use it. We use them more as a buffer to support a volume recruitment effort. If you really want to be successful in recruiting, it goes back to where I said, pick up the phone. You have to build relationships. This is a people business. While technology and automation have become the forefront of what many agencies are using, they are not the answer. The more you remove human interaction and the more you remove actual grunt effort, picking up the phone and dialing 50 to 100 calls a day, the more you remove the opportunity to actually find people. In fact, one of the areas that I've been most successful in recruiting, I always goal myself to find a candidate who is currently employed, happily employed, enjoys what they're doing, but happens to be interested in the opportunity I have because of X, Y, and Z, which does come back to your employment branding. So to hire the best people out there, the best recommendation is to find the people who are already employed because they're employed for a reason.
Okay, great. The next question I have is, if your company is a startup or has limited resources because it may be a smaller company, how do you attract that star talent? How do you recruit it?
It can be very challenging. I think for startups and smaller companies, the truth is we even sometimes have trouble helping them as well because not every candidate is interested in going to a 5 or 6 person company because of the unknown. Will this company be here in 5 years? Will this company be here in 10 years? You don't have to be Google or Yahoo or Sony to be an employer of choice. You don't. You can be an award-winning place to work by simply following a few practices. First, make sure what you're telling candidates in the interview process is what they actually experience when they come work for you. Make sure that the people doing your interviewing are they themselves positive and enthusiastic to work for you. If your manager is miserable and you know it, don't have that person interview new candidates because they're going to pick up on it in the interview. If the person I meet's miserable working here, why would I want to come work here? So it is sometimes challenging from a budget perspective to really optimize postings or external recruitment or even to hire an internal recruiter. So one of the best recommendations I would make is if you have an HR person who is your core HR representative and you don't have the budget or the finances to have an HR team, my best recommendation is to try to find someone in human resources that also has a recruiting background. For a medium to larger company, I actually recommend splitting them up entirely. Recruitment should be a different unit than HR. They work together. They shouldn't be the same. They should be treated differently because they are different jobs. But for a smaller company, you can't do that. Try to have one individual resource that has experience doing both. That resource may also have connections with external recruiters they've used in the past and can rely and trust on. They also may know where they've been successful in posting and how to post those jobs. Other than that, it can be a challenging. Monitor your budgets, and if your postings aren't working, don't keep using them. Re-optimize your post or find somewhere else to post the job.
Great, John. And we have a question from Terry that said she recently experienced a situation in which a candidate was flown in for an interview with the expenses paid. However, if the candidate was offered the job and refused, they were required to repay those expenses. Is that a common practice?
So just to understand, is the a common practice? Is the question of the company paying the expenses, or is the question for the candidate not reimbursing?
I think the question is it a common practice to require the candidate to um, repay the organization for the expenses if they are offered the job and refuse it?
To be honest, from my experience, that is not that common. What I usually find is that smaller organizations cannot always afford the cost of flying in an applicant. So I sometimes hear the opposite, where the candidate has to pay for their travel. If they get the job, the position will be reimbursed. But these days, we do see much more often in a situation where you're looking at relocating candidates or flying them in. If you truly can't hire local talent, if it's just not working or if it's just not available, we would recommend trying to make it part of your budget to fly that person in. It's a much more warming experience for the candidate. If it's a lower level or medium job and candidates are paycheck to paycheck and you're asking them to come up with $500 to $1,000 to interview for your company and they don't get it, you're hurting them financially. You could even be taking food off their table. So maybe coming up with a split agreement where 50 and 50 is paid could be helpful. I am surprised that if the candidate agreed to reimburse, they are now sidestepping that agreement. That's really unfortunate, but it's also a good thing to find out now as opposed to after you hire them, because that's a bad character trait in my opinion.
Absolutely. And, this is where technology comes into play again, is with Skype and webcams. If it's a great way to interview those candidates and narrow it down to your top two or three that you want to fly in as a way to go ahead and eliminate or reduce those expenses. And it sounds like, Terry, the organization had some difficulties as well. So once again, remember how John said that our interview process includes the candidate interviewing us, and they recruit and look at candidates or companies as well as the company looks at them. So the fact that the organization was not up front is probably somewhere on the internet right now. Wouldn't you agree, John?
Absolutely. Yeah, we monitor those things daily, both for our customers, for ourselves, and for our candidates.
Great. And so we have a couple more moments. Thank you so much for being a part of us and taking place and spending your lunch hour with us. The downloads for the takeaways for the recruiting presentation and recruiting checklist are available. Also, we have some great links. If you want to know more about ACA Talent's resume package, you can click on that link. We also, Omnia offers online soft skills training and information, and you can learn more about our behavioral assessments. If you have any questions regarding the resume service or the package, please feel free to contact John. His information is at the upper left-hand side, including his email address. If you have any questions about the Omnia assessment or any future webinars that we have, please feel free to contact me. My information is at the top as well. The recording will be available next week. And John, we have about 1 minute for final thoughts. Anything you want to share with us?
Sure, yeah, listen, don't overcomplicate things, guys. I mean, all of these things are very, very important, but you don't want to create a situation where the recruitment process becomes so frustrating you stop enjoying it, because again, that has a trickle down effect. Just make sure you stick to whatever you're posting in jobs, whatever your job description is, and whatever the interview process is. Make sure that it's seamless enough to where the candidate enjoys going through it. They're not going through too many hurdles. They don't need to go through 5 different days of interviewing with a manager so they can land a $30,000 job. It just should not be necessary. Don't overcomplicate the process. Try and enjoy it, because essentially hiring is the single most important thing for a company to grow. Without the right people in place, you can never get to where you want to go. And our original founder, one of his statements was, in order to have a great company, you must hire eagles because eagles soar. Eagles are only going to want to work at a company that they enjoy coming to work for every day. And people quit their managers 90% of the time before they quit working for a company. Believe it or not, people who love the company they work for, people who love what they do, if they can't stand going to work every day and seeing their boss's face, they're going to leave. It's all about your employment brand. Make the culture something people want to be a part of.
Thank you, John, and thank you so much for presenting today. For everyone that has joined us, thank you very much. Nancy, on your last question, there are not alternative dates for other webinars. However, everything that we offer as a Lunch and Learn is available on an on-site consultation or for a customized webinar for your company. Just feel free to reach out to me and give me a call and we can talk about those details. Thank you so much for joining us. It is 1:29. We are ending right on time. I look forward to talking with everyone next week, and I hope that you stay nice and warm wherever you may be. Have a great day, and thank you for being a part of our webinar today.
Thanks, everyone.